City Commission in our workshop. It's December 5th. And we're here to talk a little bit about Police Oversight Board. And I'm going to ask at this period of time if there are any public comments. Are there any public comments that would like to be made at this period of time? I'm planning also to have public comments at the end of the meeting just because I feel it's that important. So, Carrie Whitfield, would you like to start us out with public comments?
I'd like to first take the opportunity to say to the mayor, I don't see the vice mayor, but certainly the commissioners, good afternoon. City manager, hello. And thank you for taking the opportunity to review the Community Oversight Board issue today. I just wanted to say before the process began that it was in 2020 when a group of people in our community started working on the Citizens Review Board. They worked diligently for several years to try and establish it. And today may very well possibly be the beginning of a new era for the Citizens or Community Oversight Board. I thank you for taking the time and certainly showing the wisdom that it is a significant feature to be added to this city, one of which should highlight the relationship between the policing agencies and the community itself. So please take the time to think seriously about it and certainly take the time to listen to potential questions that will be asked regarding the draft that has been sent out. I personally have reviewed the draft. There are certainly some things I'd like to see changed in it, but more importantly, I am pleased that you have taken this opportunity to share your opinion and your discussions with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Appreciate it. Is there any other public comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll go to the brief overview, and I'm going to turn over to our city manager, Rebecca Fleury.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I appreciate your time this evening. Carrie, it was a perfect introduction to what I'm going to say. I'm just going to walk through kind of how we got to this particular point. Lots of things have changed, lots of things that's happened, so I appreciate you saying that because, yes, I remember sitting down with Mr. Whitfield and Chief Blocker and myself talking about why it felt like the right time to advance a Citizens Review Board and what that would look like. Kerry and his team did a tremendous amount of work, his community partners and stakeholders. And we looked at that, all the information they were sharing. We talked about other models of review boards. We had a joint meeting with PERF, the Police Executive Research Forum, and some of the data that they had around oversight boards or citizen review boards. And then we received a proposal, actually in 2019, between 2019 and 2020, Kerry and his group presented the proposal to the city, and then COVID. So, you know, that changed kind of the focus of everybody while we worked through that as a community, always knowing that when the time was right, we would be back at the discussions. Because I think, you know, I certainly can't speak for Chief Blocker, but the discussions that we were in, we were very supportive of it was the right time to think about a review board, and it just had to be the right model for Battle Creek. So many models out there. And so we asked the Human Relations Board to join the discussion in 2021 when we started kind of meeting again. And they created a small subcommittee to then again also re-look at models, re-look at what other communities were doing, and then what are the goals for Battle Creek in a Citizens Review Board. So then that group, the Human Relations Board, made a recommendation to the city manager's office. And then we, meaning Chief Bagley and myself, we used that information, the NAACP information, to bring forward a draft to the commission. And it seems like so long ago, but we held a workshop April 24th of this year. And we did a lot of sharing. We did a lot of listening to the commission, you know, what questions, what haven't we thought of, where are we going from here? We had learned, you know, I see Chuck in the audience, that, you know, there was a chapter in the city's code 286 that addressed this. It was different. It was a different time, and that perhaps we should use that as a template to move forward rather than just recreating brand new. So we started working towards that, and we have a new DEI officer and a new DEI office. Certainly, I think the process would have looked a little bit differently had we had the DE office in place at the time we started the discussions. But no matter, timing is timing. And so it was right then to pause and have conversations with Kimberly and let Kimberly also kind of review the whole host of data that had been gathered in the models and the work. Talk with the HRB, kind of what they were thinking, what was their subcommittee's recommendations, those types of things. But using the new lens that we are all asked to use as far as our DEI and the work that the city does. So we did do a pause, and that's always hard, because when you pause, people sometimes think that nothing is happening, but so much was happening behind the scenes. I certainly tried to keep the commission apprised of what she was doing, what Chief Bagley and I were doing. And it was really a good pause, because just last month, Kimberly was able to attend the NACOL conference. I'm going to try to remember it, the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. Which was wonderful, because she had a chance to talk with communities that already had them, communities that were thinking about them. You know, we don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel, but everybody was very clear. It's very specific to each community. There isn't a cookie cutter in this. And so she brought all that back, reached out to Chief Bagley and I to share kind of what she brought back. And you can imagine the amount of information. If you go to a conference, you're inundated with new information and people and connections and networking, which is all good. She was able to take all of that and kind of synthesize it. Talk to Chief Bagley and I about, her recommendations with the draft. And she used all of that to get to the point we are tonight. So what you have here is the draft of an amendment to Chapter 286 that's incorporated everything we've learned from NAACP, the voices from our community, what we heard in the equity audit, some comments in the CPSM study. Again, we have so much information that has led us to this point. And so Kimberly's going to walk us through this draft, and we'll look for the direction of the commission. Does this feel right to the commission? Do we advance the draft to be introduced at a commission meeting in the future? That's what we're really looking for, direction and comments about, this draft. And then, of course, if this is the draft that goes forward for consideration to the commission, there's still a lot of work to be done. Again, what we did when we paused is we gave the commission a whole lot of information in April, bylaws and things of that nature. We've now synthesized that into this document, knowing there's a lot of work after. So I will stop talking, and I will turn it over to Kimberly to go through the draft of Chapter 286. And you should all have a copy at your desk, as well as electronic version. For the public, it's also available as part of the agenda packet that's posted on our website, and that also goes out as a press release. Thanks, Kimberly.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And good afternoon, commissioners, mayor, vice mayor. It's a pleasure to be before you again. I am mostly going to speak from the document that you were provided, but I did want to just give a broader context to the world of oversight boards that will help in terms of how we look at the recommendation here today. So it's nothing new. Actually, the first oversight board dates back to the 1920s, which I didn't realize. In LA, they started a committee to record misconduct by police officers. So that's the first oversight on record. Currently, there are nearly 250 oversight boards across the United States. And more recently, the past couple of years, they've moved from a reactive to a proactive. So as opposed to being created after a high-profile incident or in response to a pattern of complaints. It's been moving more towards proactive to identify potential problems, to focus on prevention, and to create bridges between law enforcement and the community. There are 4 general models of civilian oversight boards. There is the review-focused model, and all of the titles are really descriptive of the functions of the models. So this is typically a volunteer board or commission that reviews completed complaint investigations. Excuse me. There is the investigative focused model, and that is typically an independent body that conducts investigations and is comprised of paid, professionally trained investigative staff. There is the monitor, auditor-focused model, and that is often when you see more systemic issues where those need to be addressed in terms of policies and procedures and patterns and trends. You often see that when there's an incident of a consent decree. That involves an inspector general and other paid staff. And then there are hybrid models. So you could have a hybrid agency that has characteristics of the aforementioned 3 models combined, or you can have a hybrid system like they do in Chicago, which has multiple entities within one jurisdiction that all have separate and sometimes overlapping roles. The model that we're looking at today is a review-focused model. And I'm not going to read this document word for word, but I do want to just highlight portions of some of the sections. So in terms of the purpose of the Community Oversight Board is to provide input in an advisory capacity to the city manager or their designee in reconsidering the police chief's determination following a community relations complaint investigation filed pursuant to the Battle Creek Police Department policy. Furthermore, the Community Oversight Board will take a proactive approach in identifying potential problems, building partnerships with law enforcement, and creating bridges between law enforcement and community, reflective of where we're seeing the trend in oversight models going today. The next section really talks about the scope of authority and duties. The Community Oversight Board will have the authority to reconsider any community relations complaint investigation determination in which the police chief has determined a finding of exoneration, unfounded, misconduct, not based on complaint, or not sustained. The Community Oversight Board's scope of authority when considering a determination will be limited to the facts, circumstances, and evidence gleaned by the Office of Professional Standards Investigation or their designee known at the time the decision was made by the police chief. Membership. The original document that was included with the workshop announcement had an error. So it listed 9 members. The Community Oversight Board would actually be comprised of 7 members and 2 alternates. So I did want to make that note in case you have the version that was made available earlier. Terms, pretty self-explanatory, same with meetings and listing the reports that would be required of the Community Oversight Board. With the membership, there is one question that came up in discussions with the Human Relations Board. And because the police department currently has a contract to serve Bedford Township, there was a question whether a member, a resident of Bedford Township would be eligible to serve on this board. And that's a question that we would like to pose to the commission this evening for discussion. But ponder that, and I'll quickly go through the rest of the document here in terms of DE office recommendations. If this moves forward and is approved via resolution, the DE office would then be responsible for executing the next steps, which would include community education about the Community Oversight Board, and recruitment of member applicants. And then coordination of training, which would be provided by a third-party consultant and city staff. In terms of the consultant, this would be an outside agency or individuals, and would be contracted through an RFP process. I have done quite a bit of research on who provides training in this regard, and there are several national and regional agencies and consultants that provide this type of training and have the expertise and years of experience with oversight boards. It is the DEI office's recommendation that after the training, the COB, or Community Oversight Board, develop the bylaws for approval by the City Commission, and that they review the functions noted in the draft document and make any additional recommendations, as well as create a final document of the processes and duties, again, for approval by the City Commission. So that's where you would find a more detailed listing about the complaint process, how many days from when a complaint is filed to when it's heard, et cetera. The rest is pretty self-explanatory. I won't go through those specific items, but I did want to mention, coming out of the NACO conference, what was stressed over and over again in terms of civilian oversight boards, or in our case, Community Oversight Board, were three things: the importance of community education, educating the community members about the complaint process, about police department procedures and policies, about the work of the oversight board, any findings, the annual report that I mentioned previously. It's also important that this board establish trust with the community. For Battle Creek, certainly this would be very new, and so it would be very important to build trust. And it's also critical for this to be seen as a legitimate resource and avenue for community members. And in terms of legitimacy, it would be critical to be very intentional about this work, to be action-oriented and engaged with the community. And it will take time to build that trust and legitimacy. And there are different methods or tools that will help aid in that process. We'll circle back to membership, but who serves on the board will be important, and whether you want to engage certain stakeholders or organizations as part of that membership. Those are all considerations in terms of helping to build trust and legitimacy when implementing something of this magnitude. I mean, it's very important work. It will be a role that anyone placed on this board should take seriously and really commit to, because a lot of training will be invested in board members. And as I mentioned, it would be a very important resource for the community. The timeline would be, this is just a tentative timeline. It would need to be adjusted depending on what comes out of our discussion today. And I believe I will pause there, and whether you want to circle back to the membership discussion of Bedford Township or other questions that I'm sure you have at this point in the process, I will zip it and turn it back over to you.
Okay, do we have any questions of Kimberly? Commissioner Ballard and then Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mayor. Kim, I just wanted to make sure, as serving on that board with you to develop this, we have 7 members and 2 alternates, and we talked about the case of Bedford Township. Since we provide police service to them, would they have a membership on the board? It just came to my mind as you were speaking about that. What if we pick up Springfield or Emmett or something else? Not that it's in the plans in any way, people. I'm just asking if they are, would they have an opportunity to come onto the board? Or would we have to remove somebody on the 7 and 2 alternates to get there?
I think you raise a great point, and I would invite my colleagues to join in that particular response.
I would just say that if that happens, we could amend the ordinance, that's not a difficult process, I'm not sure exactly what all we're going to have in the ordinance, but it could just be amended to address that if that's what the commission wished.
Thank you.
And again, I just want to add one thing. So the process behind the COB would not preclude anyone from filing a complaint. So while the board membership is an important component to the makeup, the process of this reconsideration is open and available to anyone that would actually want to have those findings reconsidered.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes, I might make a suggestion on that Bedford Township. Maybe it should be like the amount of members that serve, or how we serve the area, I'm sorry, the members that serve the area, like say we do expand, and no more than, or not at least one per area that we service. Something like, you know what I'm saying? Like, say, so we added Springfield, or we added Penfield, or something like that. Like, no more, or no one, at least one person could be on the board. So next time when we do selections, they would be eligible. They wouldn't be at that time, but next time they would be eligible for having that area. I don't know. That was one suggestion I thought of. So at least you have at least one representative from each area that we serve on the board. But I do have something about the membership too, also about, I guess I'll draw this up in the bylaws, like some type of ethics on the board, how ethical they'll be keeping this information, because some of this information may be detrimental not only to the officers, but their families and others in the area. So make sure that there's some penalties to keep those, that information silent as much as possible, and what type of penalties would be involved, how someone would be removed from the board for not following the ethics that are standard in that type of information. I mean, that's really a lot of my concern is how much information are we getting? How is it going to be controlled? Because mostly this is because of if the chief doesn't find anything wrong. I mean, we're not doing any other investigations on anything else. If we just feel that we need to look a little further into what his findings were, is that what I'm understanding? It would be the only time we investigate, from what I'm reading. It wouldn't be every complaint filed. It would just be
No.
certain ones, of course.
I can probably bring a
Yeah.
little bit of clarity. You want to go first, Jim?
I was just going to say, there's not really, and they're not conducting an investigation. They're looking over
Okay.
things that have already been done. And, I would include either in bylaws or ordinance provision about conflict of interest. We'll address the confidentiality. There's also state laws about things like Garrity statements that couldn't go, which are statements by police officers that happen in internal affairs investigation. We're prohibited by law. I think it's a crime if we were to release that, so they wouldn't get Garrity statements.
Okay.
They just can't.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of work involved. I definitely can see that. That's why I was bringing up some of these questions.
But to your point, it is critical that there is in writing in the bylaws that all of that is clearly spelled out.
Yes. The other thing is like, say the review board does find something that needs to be further looked at. What are the legal ramifications of that? Is there a private investigation, or is this going to be what we're going to talk about when the bylaws get made, that type of thing? How do we move forward?
Sorry, answering a text.
That's all right.
Why don't I just kind of give a brief outline of process?
Okay.
And that might help.
Because, I mean, we've got a framework here, and I'm trying to,
Exactly. So typically what'll happen is fill in the blank, whether it's a citizen generates a complaint against an officer for whatever that may be. That complaint is then forwarded to the Office of Professional Standards and/or the immediate supervisor or lieutenant of that specific division. An investigation is conducted, departmental policy, case law is reviewed, and a determination is made based upon all the information, along with an interview of the citizen involved. A determination is then made by all that information, and then that citizen is provided with the outcome of that investigation. And let's just say they disagree with that outcome. Then they would have an opportunity to come before the board, the COB, and say, I would like this reconsidered for the following reasons. And then the board makes the determination, and then they're provided an opportunity to present to the board the facts and circumstances that they would like to be considered, and then the Office of Professional Standards would also come in and go over their investigation to the degree in which they can, guarantee issues and things like that Jill outlined. At the end of that process, the COB then would weigh the information in its totality to make that determination. Does that help? And that
It
was-
does, the next part is as though, like, say, the COB feels that there needs to be more done, that the person is found more, I would say, that their complaint was actually valid and they have to move on. What happens next? Are we legally bound to do a full investigation, have the state come in, that type of thing? And again, these may be just questions we're going to have to ask when we set up the bylaws. This is just something I wanted to know. How legally bound are we to complete satisfaction for everyone involved, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, legally is a different animal. We're talking about, so none of this process would preclude the individual from pursuing anything legally outside of, this is more of an administrative process which would lend transparency and accountability.
That's what I'm saying. How far out, after they make a decision, are we obligated to, again, satisfy the citizen's complaint if there's more involvement? I mean,
Sure, so I guess as we get down the road, but
yeah.
if the determination was made that I made a mistake or I got it wrong, then that could be appealed to the city manager. And then the city manager then, based upon whatever that information may be on those findings, then could hold me accountable for that mistake and or error or lapse of judgment, whatever that may be.
Okay. I think I understand what you're saying. I just want to make sure it's clear. So the city manager would be the last of the line of the, complete the process, I guess I would call it.
Administratively.
Okay.
Right.
I think that's what I was looking for, just because, again, it doesn't say how we move forward. If there's a finding that we need to move forward, or say the Citizens Board says, nope, it was great, you did a great job, it ends here. That's what I want to know, where we're done satisfied with the whole process. Sure. What happens. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few comments and then a few questions. When we discovered that we had this old committee that was defunct, I guess my question to staff is, how do we not let this go that same direction? 10 years down the road, this fizzles, and I want to see this continue going forward and to put the importance on it. So what is staff's thoughts about that?
Do you want me to take that one?
Sure, and
I
then
didn't
I
wanna-
can follow up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think some of the components, and you're right, Commissioner O'Donnell, there's a lot more work to be done, and I think it was important that we took this step back and do baby steps into each one of them, because it is big. But one of the things that, in the framework of the bylaws, is they have to provide an annual report, and that they have to meet, because there's a lot of training required around the board, for the board members. So in some ways, those are ways to prevent it not from becoming obsolete or lost.
Makes sense.
And so we wanted to include that. Some of the other things that we were talking about was, and I can't remember if Chief Bagley said it or if Commissioner O'Donnell said it, but you're right, not every complaint will rise to the level of the COB. But I think in some of the draft bylaws we've been looking at, they've agreed to provide the list of all complaints and, internals that we've done, even if they don't come to the level of the board. Because again, this is transparency and accountability. We're trying to build in as much of that as we can that doesn't, violate any legal rights of the officers and/or a complainant. Does that?
Very good.
Okay.
Yeah, that answers that question, because I just don't want to see this go the way of our previous board. And the final line here on the first page, the COB will not have the authority to issue subpoenas, conduct independent investigations, interview witnesses or officers. I remember this discussion in April at our meeting, and I think it was a consensus of the commission that we did not want this board to have that subpoena authority. I could see it having the potential to become unwieldy and then going off in a direction we didn't necessarily want it to go on. But I foresee, and it seems like I remember talking about this, I foresee the board at some point saying, hey, we're looking at this investigation. you missed asking a very important question. Okay, can we kick this back to the police? And I'm not saying force a reopening of the investigation, but maybe you need to bring somebody in and ask them this question. What are the mechanisms for that? And that looks like Chief's ready to tackle.
Well, certainly.
that. Yeah.
So, yeah, without question, if by some means or some way that there was information that was not covered within that internal investigation, then it is absolutely critical that that information is gained, right, to help with making the determination. So anytime there would be any type of evidence or information out there that could impact the determination, then by all means would we go back and make sure that we handle that business so that we can actually make the best possible decision with all the information given.
I just want to make sure we're not giving them the authority to force a reopening of an investigation, but if there's something glaringly obviously that the committee as a whole
Sure.
believes was missed, it sounds like you will have the.
Oh, I think that's very reasonable. I think that's very
Okay.
reasonable. Yeah.
That's good.
If I-
And I
if
guess
I-
to piggyback on, did you want to add something there, Jill? Yes, please.
So, there are just too many potential what-ifs out there. I mean,
Sure.
we're not going to put in rules in place to try to address everything that's going to come up. So, what might happen is the Oversight Board meets and says, City Manager, we'd like this to be reconsidered, and, here's the reason. And remember, the City Manager and the Police Chief are accountable for how things are going, and that's really going to be if there's unhappiness by the board that things aren't being addressed, there's just accountability for those kind of things happening. So that's why we're not going to be real specific, because we just can't cover everything that might come up. But certainly, if the Oversight Board were to say, we think that this is why we think it should be reconsidered, because we think up. And then the city manager is going to talk with the chief, and likely if there's evidence that was missed or something, that would be addressed in some type of a follow-up. And then I think there also was some confusion about Chapter 286, and I had looked through this I was actually aware of this chapter in the ordinances for several years. So it looks like it met for about 3 years, and I think it was formed in response to some situation, some police situation. And there was an amendment to it in 1983, and then so it looks like it was active for maybe 3 years, and then it looks like it kind of fell off the radar.
And then this, to piggyback on Commissioner O'Donnell's, where does the report go? I think we got a clarification that ultimately it would, if there's not a concurrence with the investigation, the city manager then has the opportunity. At what point is the commission, or maybe not at all, privy? Is this just on the annual report, or are we, hey, this board said we have a problem, city manager didn't do anything with it. Is there a next level within the city government outside of the administration, or does it kick to another authority outside of the city altogether? Can you expand on that?
I mean, people can always go and file a lawsuit, do a civil rights complaint with the Department of Justice, those different kinds of things. There is a provision that there will be a report made to the commission. My assumption, again, city manager is accountable to the commission. I would assume that, you would be updated on if there were things that the commission would want to know, the city manager would include that in updates to the commission.
Okay. Then as far as the membership is concerned, as far as the question of Bedford, absolutely. If we're providing them police service, I believe they ought to be eligible. I have a problem with saying one seat goes to Bedford, and then if we add additional municipalities, they get a seat, well, it really dilutes the number of seats. We only have 5, and then 2 alternates. So 7 seats, but 5 voting members. So I guess, yes, include Bedford, but my preference would be that they're eligible to apply for the position. The citizens of the Bedford Township would be eligible to apply for the position. Do we want to put a limit on how many we have from the outlying municipalities? That's something we might want to consider. No more than one. And it could be from, if we do pick up Emmett Township or another municipality, then they could be seated on that. But giving each municipality certain board, I can see that maybe diluting the effectiveness for citizens of the city of Battle Creek. And as far as the appointment process, I hope that it's a public process. I hope that we have opportunity for public application for seats on this board. I hope that the commission is involved in reviewing those. I'm not sure what entity these will ultimately go to make the recommendation. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and I did just quickly want to also add to the response in regard to how to keep this going. There is a significant amount of training that will be required for board members, and so it will be essential to budget for that each year. And as it stands now, with the recommendation, the DE office would be the staff liaison. It will be important to keep a staff liaison to make sure that there is orientations, there is recruitment, et cetera. And then also, if there is intentionality around community engagement and there is trust that is established and there is legitimacy, I truly believe the community will hold the city accountable to make sure that there is this avenue for community members. Having said all that, I forgot your question.
About what we envision as our process for appointing these board members.
Yeah,
Being
so
a
right-
public process, having community engagement and involvement in that, not just being decided by some staff members and, expected the city commission to rubber stamp that. I'm hoping we're all involved in the community, the commission, staff. What do you envision that, or how that will work, that process?
So the way that it's written right now, the process is the same as any other city commission or board. So the public can apply to serve on a board or commission. Those applications are reviewed by the review committee, and then recommendations are made by the review committee to the city commission for approval.
And the review committee being the mayor, the vice mayor, and city manager?
And usually the chair of said board or commission.
And staff liaison.
So it would be yourself?
In this regard, yes.
Okay. It's just my hope that we make it more. We've had a lot of discussion about these board appointments recently, and some of these, I think, rise to the level that do require more commission engagement and more community involvement. And so I respectfully ask that we consider that. That's all I have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kim. I want to say, first and foremost, I think this is off to a great start. This is, I can't say it again. I'll say it again. It's a great start. It's fantastic, and I think we're on, at the beginning, we're at the initial steps of something that I think is going to be really positive for our community. But with that, I want to kind of dovetail a bit, because I had some concerns, too, regarding language surrounding appointments. Specifically, the language, members are recommended by the review committee and placed with the consent and approval of the Battle Creek City Commission. I share Commissioner Simmons' concerns on this. I would prefer no recommendation by any board to fill its own members. I just feel it creates an insular environment where you're not really getting the opportunity for fresh perspectives to crack in, because, it's all internal. So I'd like to see that. Do with it what you may. Then beyond that as well, too, and this is mostly just tidying up language, I think, within the ordinance itself. But there are a couple of references here to, in the purpose, COB may also request city manager or designee inquire into the conduct of a police officer in the absence of a complaint. BCPD will share all BCPD investigations with the COB, even if they do not rise to the level of review, a complaint, to the COB. And then in reports, of course, the primary output in terms of reports are, how we handle these complaints in the complaint process. I'm just concerned that there's a scope issue here, just in the language. If we could hone it into, are we specifically concerning ourselves with actual complaints, or this is where it gets, in terms of policy and the ordinance, this is where it gets confusing for me, and I think the scope question comes in. If there's not a complaint, but something's under review, and you have access to, all investigation information, if you're not able to review anything but complaints, but then also have access to all this other stuff, and can potentially, point the city manager in a direction that isn't associated with an actual complaint. I'm just concerned about that in regard to scope. So if we could have some language in the ordinance to kind of either expand the scope, which I don't know what that would look like, or just really tailor it more closely to saying, this is focused on complaint-driven actionable items, I guess. Only because, again, there's a scope question and there's a concern, on my behalf anyway, of how this board would handle something that didn't stem, from an actual complaint. And again, like I said, I'm not, I think we could expand it, or we could just tailor a little bit more. I prefer to tailor a little bit. But those are the two comments I had. I think otherwise, just an outstanding start. So thank you very much for your efforts on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Vice Mayor?
So going back to membership, so we've got 5 residents of whatever municipalities, townships we are providing service to. Then we've got 2 more residents who are alternates. Now, can those alternates be from those townships or other cities if we're providing service? And then we've got the HR director and the DEI officer. And so there are 7 votes on the COB, or there are 5 votes and 2 ex officio and then 2 alternates, or how does that work?
Rebecca has said that it's in there that there's 5 votes.
Is
So
the
the others-
draft, the 2 city positions, the HR and the DI officer are non-voting, but that was a question we wanted to pose to the commission. Again, sometimes our boards where staff is ex officio non-voting, this is proposed that way, and it's fine, but if that's not the direction the commission would like us to see with the 2 staff representatives, which is the HR director and the DI officer, that's fine, it's open. We've seen it both ways in other communities. But as it is drafted right here, it's 5 residents of the city, and then 2 are alternates, non-voting, unless they're needed if one of the 5 is unavailable. And then the DEI officer and the human resources director comprise the board as drafted.
So this is how it's proposed, and this is the time to let us know if you'd like something different. Do you want the ex officio members to be voting? Because, very often they do vote on other boards. It's proposed here that they not. So, tell us if you do want them to vote, and tell us if you want something different on residents of outside of the city, but who we provide police services to, and about alternates. I mean, this is the proposal, you tell us what you want.
Okay. So for whatever it's worth, I would prefer HR and DEI not be voting members, that the only voting members are citizens. I think that we do need to somehow recognize those other areas that we provide service to. The other thing that I've been thinking about are the terms. So, I don't know, Chief or Rebecca, you may be able to tell me. So, what is our contract with Bedford? How long is that contract?
I feel like, I can look it up here, but I feel like it goes to summer of '25, but I'll check.
Yeah.
Well, so here's kind of the point. So if we no longer are providing service to Bedford because they either develop their own department or they contract with someone else to provide that service, is it really appropriate to have someone that doesn't live in an area to which we're providing service? So I want to make sure that any COB member is someone that is receiving services from the city, for whatever that's worth. I don't know how you put something like that together.
I could just address that in the term, just like we do with the ex officio members, that they'll kind of be like that, but, you know, that they're provided that the city still has a police services contract in effect with them.
Which language may cover if we ever have additional areas in which we provide. If we do generic language, like either, if we are providing services outside of the city, they would be eligible for consideration. I think that's what I heard. They don't get a said seat. They should be considered as part of the 5, is I think what I'm hearing. But if such time as we no longer provide the service, that they would no longer be eligible. So we would have, well, here's where it's going to be important to have an alternate, because then we can slide an alternate member in, and they have been involved all along, the training, the attendance, those types of things, is what I think I'm hearing.
Okay. And then with regard to notification to the city commission as to kind of what's happening, and Jill has made the point that, you know, Rebecca does an outstanding job in communicating with the city commission. But Rebecca will not be here indefinitely. I'm sure Kim won't be here indefinitely as the DEI officer, so I'm looking at kind of sustainability going forward. I think that there needs to be some sort of specific mechanism that calls out reporting to the commission on certain, or in certain instances, aside from an annual report that we would get. So that's kind of my 2 cents for whatever that's worth.
And just off the top of my head, it could be wrapped into the city manager evaluation process, because we have set points in time where the commission receives reports. So I think it's quarterly, and just would be added a report from the COB. This is where we're at, number of issues brought, or trainings, if there aren't any complaints that rise, but the trainings that received. You know, I think that could be incorporated as a suggestion. That'll be up to the commission if they want something more. And then certainly, if there are boards and commissions that need to be thought of outside of the review committee process, that's a commission decision. Certainly, we can do that. You know, every board is not the same. So that would have to be discussed. Right now, it's written as that because that's the process we have. But we would have to have action from the commission to not follow that process because it's in place right now. Certainly open to that.
And then I guess finally, so someone brings there is an incident, the chief makes a determination, then there's an appeal to the COB. The COB says, nope, what the chief did is absolutely appropriate, you know, we've done all of our steps. What occurred was appropriate, so you still have someone that is not happy. Nothing here precludes them from going a more legal, I'm going to sue you kind of
That's
route.
correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. I think that's all I have for now.
If I could just insert one, so it's not an appeal, it's a request for reconsideration.
Okay, are there any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Morris.
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about if the community education aspect of it has been talked about, what that may look like as far as accessibility, and then if it's not already included in the community education, I would like there to be like an extremely detailed scope of the work so that people don't assume that they want to be on the board, and then we invest all of the training and education into these people that assume that they want to be on the board, and then they decide that it's too heavy or the time commitment is too much. So I just would like that to be clearly outlined first.
That's a great point. Actually, I just met yesterday with our communications director to begin to map out what a community education plan would look like, because we do want to be very intentional and go beyond traditional tools or platforms that we use for promoting information. So certainly those would be involved, but there would also be relationship building involved, partnering with community organizations. So there will be a detailed plan developed, which I would be very happy to share out with the commission for feedback.
Thank you. And I also have another question, and this may be for the commission, actually. So if we do appoint or open it up for a member to be from Bedford Township, is this something that we want to make a requirement, that there has to be somebody from Bedford Township? And then that leads me to question if we would need one of our alternates then to be from Bedford Township so that we have that contingency.
I think it's up to the commission. I would prefer one alternate to support the Bedford Township appointee if there's someone appointed from Bedford Township. Just so in the event that there is some concerns that if the commissioner from Bedford Township is absent, the alternate from Bedford Township can fill in. Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this question probably is geared more towards Jill. And I don't expect an answer, but if you could look into it, unless, of course, you have it right off the top of your head. To what extent are the activities, the findings of a COB, to what role do they play in a legal proceeding? And this kind of gets back to my scope question before. You know, if you're presenting the COB with all the formal documentation that, you know, the chief would have, and then, you know, you have some other element, maybe it wasn't a complaint, or some other variable, some other document that, you know, maybe wasn't didn't feel it was necessary to be part of the investigation, but it is something the COB reviews. You know, what role does that play in a future legal proceeding where the city is saying A, but in discovery or somewhere along the line, a document that alludes to B or A.1 comes up? What role do those findings, do those documents, do those activities play in a hearing throughout the course of, you know, a legal case? And again, this is just food for thought if you could look into it, unless, of course, you're familiar already.
Yeah, you know, we're trying to do a balancing act here between the commission not wanting to have something be put on hold because, you know, the statute of limitations for most of these lawsuits is 3 years. And we may not, somebody may file a citizen's complaint that goes through the Community Oversight Board early in the process, and we don't even have an idea that there's going to be a lawsuit. So, you know, there are going to be things that we would have to deal with. Some things might not have an impact because we would dub it subsequent remedial measures, which are things that are supposed to be excluded from a court case because the court, the judicial process encourages fixing things if you realize there's a problem and they don't want you to be, you know, have some negative consequences because you've taken some action after the fact to remedy a problem. You know, we get exhaustive documents, so really any kind of relevant documents, I would certainly think it's not going to be a surprise to us what would be presented to the Oversight Board. As I said, they're not going to get Garrity statements because we're not allowed to. That's prohibited by law. But just as part of the process, whenever there's a lawsuit, we get the internal affairs investigation. I mean, we have all of that stuff. We request any citizens' complaints having to do with any of the officers that are involved. So I would like to think we're not going to be surprised by anything that's there.
Thank you.
If
And
that
that really
answers
just
your
kind of gets
questions.
back to what I think we need to solve, at least to the letter anyway, the scope question. Because what if there isn't a complaint? you know, but the COB does direct Rebecca through the guidance in the ordinance, direct city manager designate to inquire into conduct of a police officer in the absence of a complaint. How does that play into the legal proceedings here, and are there vulnerabilities for the city in that regard? And again, I don't expect an answer, but if you could just look into it and see if, has this come up in the past?
I can't imagine, I mean, we'll flag things just from getting a notion that maybe something should be looked into. That we'll flag things, and we'll talk to PD, and we'll put holds on documents. So I can't, I just have I know it's difficult to explain it, but being in this process, I find it difficult to believe that, say, the Oversight Board would come up with something that would actually be enough to constitute a cause of action for a lawsuit that we wouldn't already be aware of.
Okay, great. Well, that's great to hear. Thank you, Jill. Just something to keep an eye on. Thank you.
Chris?
I know staff was looking for direction as far as the city representatives on the board, the human resources and the DEI officer, and I concur with Vice Mayor that I don't believe those should be voting members. This is a community oversight board, and you don't really think it would even be appropriate for staff to be, not that I'm suggesting that they would, but have any influence over the decision of that board. They'll obviously be available for answering questions for the board members as they come up, but in actually casting that vote, I think that needs to be with our residents. And then as far as I've listened to some of the opinions on Bedford Township. I struggle with saying we want one seat, it has to be Bedford. What if we don't get any applicants from Bedford? So I'd like that opportunity to be there for them, but not a forced thing. And then as far as designating an alternate, same thing. The opportunity there, we serve your area, you can be a member, but to not have numbers associated with that, with the exception of the whole board can't be Bedford Township residents. Some kind of limit, only one seat. That's just a suggestion, but.
I was going to ask for
Yeah.
some clarification. Commissioner Morris suggested that one alternate be from Bedford if we're providing them police services, and then one regular member. So I wanted to see what other commissioners think, because that might be a little disproportionate considering the number of residents in City of Battle Creek versus Bedford Township. And if one of the regular 5 members is absent, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the Bedford person, that you've got an alternate that you want to have an alternate from Bedford that sits in for them. And that, whether an alternate shows up, that usually is often is pretty last minute. And so it might be kind of cumbersome to for the city manager's office or Kimberly to have to make sure the alternate that's from Bedford happens to be available that night to show up. So I would like, since I'll be working on this ordinance, I would like a little more consensus from the commission about, what are your thoughts about an alternate from Bedford?
Good.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. No, I'm for the independence of the city staff not voting on this, but it also brings up one other thing on membership. Could a family member of city staff be eligible to be membership on the board? Because it doesn't really say that either. That should be an exemption in there too, just to make it, as what we're trying to do, independent. So that would be my suggestion, is that would be just one more eligibility requirement, that just immediate family. You don't have to go out to aunts and uncles or that type of thing, but just something like that. If we're going to make this a true independent board, we need to look into that. There's going to be, I was going to say, this is a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And we all here, I agree, we all here want to make this look good the first time and not have to revisit it. Are we going to be ready for next week according to this timeline? That, it seems quite aggressive.
2 weeks.
Okay, okay, because it said the 19th on here. Oh, yeah, it is 2 weeks, so, sorry. But still, it just seems like a lot, that there's a lot of question marks still out there that we're going to want to take a look at, especially this, but same with the membership. I think I'm going to change my mind a little bit and just say eligible to apply if you're in that area. So we still got to pick the 5 people. And again, I want to be as independent as possible and inclusive, but you're right, we start getting into these gray areas where someone say, oh, all 5 came from Battle Creek. That ain't right, they're not representing me. But that may be how it turns out that time. But we really need to strive for that independence, and it may be that we just say the application process is open to or family members that are not part of the city staff with the area that we service, something like that. Does that sound? I have the superpower of confused, so if that confuses you, please stop me. But yeah, is that would be a good understanding of how membership would be in that?
I think I'm just going to repeat back to you what I heard.
Okay, please
that
do.
Family members of city employees would not be eligible to serve on the board, and your recommendation to your colleagues is that Bedford Township residents are eligible to apply, but there's not a specific designated spot.
Yes, there we go. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Smith?
I'll just put one other thing out there in regard to membership. I would be in favor of just tossing geography out of the window and saying we have a seat reserved for anybody or any municipality that contract that we provide PD for on a contractual basis. And then you have a member and an alternate that fit those conditions. But again, food for thought.
Did you say a member and an alternate, or a member or an alternate?
A member and an alternate that just serve as a representative from our contracted police service.
And I looked it up, the
Partners.
Bedford Township contract right now goes to June 30th of 2024, so.
Vice Mayor?
I think I would have some qualms about having designated alternates coming from outside the city. We know that we're always going to service the city unless we do away with our police department. But if Bedford chooses to go in another direction and we no longer are providing services to them, and we have someone, if we have a regular member of the board and now we have an alternate, and you've referenced several times the cost and the time of training these people, and now they're no longer eligible for membership on this board, and now we've got 2 vacancies that need to be filled. So that would be my concern with having a slotted.
So what about one position, if there is up to one position can be appointed, and a preference if we do have a police services contract with a resident from an outlying jurisdiction, that no more than one of them could be appointed, and they're eligible to apply for vacancy, because we don't know what kind of numbers that we're going to get, but no requirement that it be someone from an outlying jurisdiction that we have a police services contract with.
I guess that's what I was trying to articulate. That sounds what
Okay.
my thought was, yes.
Mayor,
Yes. Go ahead, Commissioner. And then Commissioner Malone.
Thank you.
I'll let you go first.
Okay, thanks. So I am not opposed to us just saying that we are going to open it up for one member from a different municipality to join. I don't think that there should be more than one member. But I also think that it's important that the alternates are at meetings, just in case they need to jump in. They need to be up to date with what's going on. Even if they're not voting at these meetings, they still need to be there. So it shouldn't be a concern that we have to try and get somebody to come last minute, because they should already be planning to be at those meetings.
Any other?
Yeah, Mayor.
Commissioner Ballard?
Thank you, and I agree with you, Commissioner. I just wanted to make clear where I was coming from here. As far as a membership of an area that we service, I was really, without saying it, I guess, wanting that person to be represented if the issue involves their community. So if the incident happened in Bedford, then an alternate or someone from that community could serve in regards to that. That's where my thought pattern was coming from, so.
I think we would have that addressed with what I had proposed, that.
Okay.
You know, and one other thing, given Commissioner Morris's statement, we've had problems in the past with committees and boards where maybe somebody's not showing up for meetings. And we sometimes will go through and amend and do a specific definition about, you know, what's misfeasance, not showing up at meetings. So what are the thoughts about, and how many times are they, how frequently are they supposed to meet per this proposal?
A minimum of quarterly.
Minimum of quarterly. So how many meetings can they miss in a 12-month period? Are there thoughts on that before having to be booted? Or maybe you don't want to be so specific, but I just know that's been a problem in the past, so I wanted to raise it.
I know it's a problem on some committees, monthly, but I think at some point in time, the people that miss meetings need to realize they need to step back and
Right.
not be a member of the committee.
That doesn't always happen.
I know, I know. But we just had one in the planning commission that resigned, just because she felt that meeting the meetings is not going to be possible. But maybe that's another discussion point in the future. I would hope that this committee will be more effective than any of the other committees, especially only meeting quarterly.
Mayor, I also have one more comment.
Commissioner Ballard?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, too, is there any way that we can share the cost of this training and stuff if we're going to invite people from outside the city, that their community pay for that training part?
We have pretty well set out in the police services contract. I mean, that's a point of negotiations, and for instance,
Yep.
we include in there that our office will prosecute.
Well, I think there's a lot of unknowns here. So depending upon who we get, it's really best practice type training as far as what we're talking about here. So I guess as long as specific to Bedford, we're in the contract, I don't see a reason necessarily to add any for cost for an additional training for them to serve. I think it's a benefit to the community. I think it's a benefit overall for the relationship between whomever we're in contract with and the city of Battle Creek to have them participate. And it's not only it's a benefit, but it's also an investment. It's an investment that they're making because this is going to be extremely time-consuming, depending upon what we face. So, not in favor of that because I think that would be almost depending upon some of this training will be in-house, right? So, I think it would be difficult to track a lot of that. So.
Just as a backup to that, then, if you don't feel that it would be right to charge them for a service that their community is creating, if it's a review, then maybe you need to price it in the pricing of the service that we're giving them.
Understand.
I just don't believe that we should be paying for a township or another municipality for something that they're going to participate in. That's just my feeling.
Well, I think to a certain degree, they're already paying for the police to provide the service. So then if we're then going to charge them additionally to have an accountability, say, with the service that we're providing from their tax dollars, I mean, I'll let you guys weigh in on that, but to me, it seems like it's almost a quasi double dip, because they're already paying for police services. So why wouldn't we want to then provide them the opportunity to have an accountability say and be part of the process along with that?
Well, like I said, price it into the police services then.
Okay, it's 20 minutes to 7. We have a meeting at 7. I promised that we would open up the floor for additional comments. Can I just see how many people would like to speak? If 5 times 3 is 15. Some of us have to eat before 7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and have public comment. If you can make your comments brief so that we can get them in within 10 minutes, I'd really appreciate it. There are some people that want to eat. All right. Kathy, did I see your hand come up? Yes, Kathy Antea?
Thank you. Brief comment about membership. Thank you so much for sharing all your ideas. And what about race? Shouldn't we potentially consider the race of the members on this committee, in particular because historically police reports are somewhat based on some racial conflicts, so I'm wondering if that may be something we want to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Jose?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Commission. I'll try to be brief. I like what I'm seeing and hearing. I've been part of this conversation for going on 2 years, and hearing y'all wrestle over it is energizing and motivating that these past 2 years haven't been a waste of time. I think making it happen in the next 2 weeks, I wouldn't recommend doing that, because I think there's a lot here to discuss, and these past 3 points are awesome, right? Community education, where's it at? When's it coming? Let's talk about it. Let's just not, because there's a lot here, so let's talk about it. And I think that would help us establish the trust so that we could come out with a nice, legitimate resource that will benefit all of us. Let's just kind of take our time and figure it out and do this right.
Thank you, Jose. Carrie?
Thank you again, and I wanted to apologize for not recognizing the Vice Mayor. The only thing I'd like to mention is that we've had major discussions about this. Previously, we provided for you a Citizens Review Board. In that Citizens Review Board, we had designated seats, standing seats, for the 4 communities: the Burmese community, BOSIS, NAACP, and the Uwezo community, since they are principally impacted by these areas of interest. In addition to that, they can play a major role in understanding, 1, the culture, and 2, the language. And I think initially the thrust behind this was to build trust in our community regarding the policing agency. And if those organizations or those groups do not feel as if they're part of this event, then the trust level is not going to be represented as we wish for it to be represented. And so again, initially I had, with our original Citizens Review Board, we had kind of established that a standing member, not the same person, from the Burmese community, BOSIS, NAACP, and the Uwezo community. I had not originally added them, but I thought it might be useful. And again, it's a language barrier, but more importantly, it's a cultural barrier. And they should feel at some point in time that they're connected or part of this.
Thank you, Gary. Commissioner Linmore Gray?
Hello, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioner, staff. Thank you for the time today. I echo a lot that's been said, so I won't repeat it. I did like the idea of not having staff be ex officios, having a vote. I want to remain with the citizens. And I also, when thinking about membership, would like to see, because I always speak for them, youth. And so I always consider that as we're doing work, and I don't know what that position would look like, but I do think that a youth voice involved or involving the Youth Advisory Board somehow on this effort would be preferred. Don't know what it looks like. I also agree that we, and put an emphasis on 2 weeks is just not enough. I really appreciate all the dialogue that was taking place tonight, but I think there is really more conversation to get to where we're trying to go, and taking all these comments and the comments you've made today into consideration. So I do not believe 2 weeks is enough time for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Deanna?
Hello, Dina Spencer, and thank you for hearing my comments today. I kind of want to support and the idea that I agree that 2 weeks is not enough. I am part of the Human Relations Board for the city, and we've been talking about this, like everybody said, for 2 years. That being said, one of the things that sitting here tonight and hearing all of the comments that has come to my mind, I'm rethinking the 5 membership now, where I wasn't before. I don't feel like that's enough. We have 50 whatever thousand people in Battle Creek, not counting Bedford, and are 5 people enough for that? So I think 2 weeks is not enough. I think now that we're getting down to the nitty-gritty details of really having this on a piece of paper and an official thing, we have some more steps to take. I didn't really think so until listening to this tonight, so I'm glad I came. And I do think that we should maybe reconsider the amount of membership and maybe make it 7 with 2 alternates. And I think of that part of this workshop, there's 8 commissioners and 2 people were not able to make it. So you take one meeting, and if 1 or 2 people are not able to attend for family issues, vacations, whatever the case might be, snowbirds, I mean, who knows? Now you've got 3 people sitting in a room, and maybe an alternate can't make it either, and now you're down to 4. So just, I don't know, something to think about, and something that I have reconsidered sitting here tonight. So thanks for all of the work from everyone in this room, all of us, all of you that has gone into this, because it's been a lot, and it's a really great thing. So I'm excited to see the end results when it gets there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and we'll adjourn our meeting now, and we'll begin our 7 o'clock meeting at 7.